ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another Gosu Gamer's Hearthstone deck guide. I'm Jorisar, and I'm going to be talking to you today, guess what, about Cthulhu. And specifically about Cthulhu Warrior, because nowadays there's hardly a tournament really where Warrior isn't brought in the majority of lineups. The meta has shifted a little bit towards a slower tempo, and thus Cthulhu Warrior has kind of overtaken the previous tier 1 deck lists for the class. And Cthulhu suits the Warrior playstyle really well, to be honest, because it has a late game focus, it benefits a ton from Warrior's heaps of removals, and you've got your hero power as well. And we're going to specifically look at two different and distinct Cthulhu Warrior variations. And they are going to be the Control Cthulhu Warrior and the Cycle Cthulhu Warrior. Now don't worry, the deck lists are on here now, but they will be up again at the end, and I'm going to go through each one in turn. So let's take a look first at Control. So this is what you would consider a standard control build. It's considered to be the cookie cutter of the current metagame. It has a very straightforward survival plan. Number 1, keep the board clean. Number 2, play big range minions when you can build Cthulhu, so stuff like Twin Emperor, Ancient Shieldbearer, Sylvanas, Thorison. You just want to get these cards out and build your Cthulhu up as quickly as possible. Some of them, of course, don't directly build Cthulhu, but you're there to force your opponent to remove it so you can be able to play those cards. Step 3, Cthulhu down the enemy. If he or she is still alive, that's okay. That side. Doomcaller and call it again. So you get the idea. Use Cthulhu, absolutely demolish the enemy. Very, very simple. Now, it's a little bit interesting because there is now a different version of Cthulhu Warrior out and about. It is the Cycle Cthulhu Warrior. It's a bit different. Its general strategy is to draw cards as fast as possible to get Cthulhu in your hand. And it's more synergistic in its playstyle, so it features board clearing and card drawing combos. You've got Battle Rage and Commanding Shout in there as well, you'll notice, but the end goal remains the same. It is still to Cthulhu your opponent down, so it's kind of two different routes to the same ultimate endgame. And these two lists are quite interesting. They're obviously different play styles, even though the goal is the same. And it's got a couple of strengths and weaknesses. But obviously there are a lot of strengths because that's why it gets brought to tournaments. And one of the biggest ones is due to its high armor gain. And of course you have loads of removal tools as well. Cthulhu Warrior just performs very well against aggressive decks, alright? It can outlast and outvalue their board. And your hero power, your armor up is just fantastic when you're fighting burst decks. Because like Freeze Mage and Miracle Rogue, it can get out of range of the kind of damage they're trying to do, and that's just excellent. But because the deck relies heavily on removal, and it doesn't really play its own threats until the mid and late game, there are a couple of weaknesses. Mid-range decks that can build a resistant board or repopulate quickly can cause problems. So mid-range Shaman and Hunter are kind of the natural predators of Cthulhu Warrior. The current matchup has improved a little bit for Warrior at the moment in the meta, but those do tend to be the decks where actually you're going to struggle a little bit. And Malagos Druid is also just quite a tough opponent because there's heavy pressure from the early mid-game till the very end of the game. And it kind of stops the Warrior, really, from hoarding armor, so it makes it easy prey for the Malagos burst damage at the end of that deck. So a couple of interesting things to watch out for. That's not to say you can't win them, but generally speaking, it's a lot less favored. Now, let's go ahead and take a look, if you're playing these kind of decks, at what you should be looking for in terms of mulligan. The survival of the Cthulhu Warrior is exclusively dependent, alright, on drawing their early game removal. You want your Fiery War Axe, you want your Slam, you want your Disciple of Cthulhu. They're an absolute must when you're fighting against aggro decks. If you miss them in the opening hand, you can lead to a snowball of an enemy board, and that of course wipes you out very quickly indeed. So you really need those kind of cards early on. Against control decks, a little bit different. You might consider keeping Justicar Trueheart and mulliganing for Execute and Shield Slam, for example. Or if it's an especially slow deck you're playing against, try not to draw too much because you want to be ahead in the inevitable fatigue war. If you're playing the Cycle Cthulhu version, aim to get your Wild Pyromancer combos in. And even the sticky Death Rattle boards, you know, like Hunter, for example, and they're generally resistant to things like Brawl, they can become pretty easy prey if you have a really nice turn 4 or turn 5 chain of whirlwind effects, for example, especially with the coin, or if you're using cards like Blood to Ichor, or possibly Commanding Shout as well. These are all things to take into consideration when you're playing the Cycle Cthulhu version. There are also other combinations available as well. In the control list, a key card is Bran Bronzebeard, because it can trigger double Doomcaller, Twin Emperor, Cthulhu himself. And Emperor Thorison, for its discount effect, obviously helps his fellow dwarf out an awful lot. It enables otherwise impossible combos. Guys, think about this. Bran plus Doomcaller on a single turn. Buh, ridiculous, right? Of course, it takes some time to build that kind of things up, but it's amazing when you do get to do it. So let's talk about the playstyles a little bit. The control playstyle, which we have up here, is a little bit more minion based and focused on single target removal. So the warrior's only real big AoE is Brawl, and maybe a combination of Revenge and Ravaging Ghoul. That does clear, but even for a control deck, despite this lack of AoE, Control Cthulhu has got a lot of threats to offer on almost every single mid-range turn. On turn 3, you've got Ravaging Ghoul. On turn 4, Cthulhu's Chosen, for example. On turn 6, you have Emperor, you have Justicar, you have Sylvanas. On turn 7, you've got Twin Emperor and Ancient Shield Bearer. And turn 8, you can bring down a Doomcaller. It's considered the easier to pilot list because of these kind of cards. It's a very straightforward deck to play in terms of its nature. There aren't really intricate combos or synergies or stuff like that. It's basically just playing a threat or answering one. And the intricacy is really knowing what the correct play is and which removal to use in every given situation. And of course, that's something that comes with experience as well. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for when you're playing this control playstyle. Now, the cycle build is a little bit more tricky because it's draw dependent and it has fewer threats of its own. It revolves around finding Cthulhu as quickly as possible while surviving the mid-game through AoE combos, and you've got the big battle rage draws as well. So against lots of aggressive matchups, your survival is gonna be reliant on pulling off wild Pyromancer clears. There's no real way of getting around that. You need to have patience on pulling the trigger though when this happens. That's gonna be a deciding factor, because you need to get maximum gain out of those Wild Pyros. Wild Pyromancer Commanding Shout is a powerful combination that stops the symmetrical effect of Pyromancer as well, so worth noting in case necessary. And it also enables some opulent Battle Rage triggers, and in many cases you will get basically 2 for 2 or 2 for 3, which is already miles better than Arcane Intellect. So if you think about it that way, that's a good way to play. Slamming Acolytes of Pain for a double card draw is also not that uncommon against control decks or if you're starving for answers, but alternatively you can also Blood to Ichor your Acolyte for draw and a bit more board presence as well. It really depends on how you want to play it. Now, let's take a look at the end game, because regardless of which deck list you're going to be playing, you are still going to want to destroy your opponents with that Cthulhu effect. So whatever the mid-game approach, we just need to outlast aggro and exhaust their resources. Very, very important against these aggro decks. They won't be able to deal with Cthulhu, and sometimes they won't even be able to deal with a Twin Emperor, so that's kind of your plan against aggro. And against control, you want to win in the extreme late game, so patience is key here. You want to go in for multiple Cthulhu triggers, for example, with Doomcaller and Bran, and you want some discounting help from Emperor Thorison. So hopefully that's been a useful introduction to Cthulhu Warrior. We have the Control Cthulhu and the Cycle Cthulhu for you to mess around and play with. Why don't you let us know in the comments what deck lists you use, what differences you have based on the decks that you see here, and how you see the meta evolving, what you think is going to be good or not good, for example, in the near future. This, of course, is another deck guide for Gosu Gamers Hearthstone. Make sure you go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm Jarasar. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook at Jarasar, and I hope to see you guys for another Hearthstone deck guide soon. Take care.